Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever said yes, while every part of you was screaming no? You agree to help, you stay late, you answer the call, you apologize when you did nothing wrong. And later, you feel tired, resentful, quietly angry. If that hit a nerve, this isn't a personality flaw. It's a boundary problem, and you're not weak for it. You were never taught how to draw the line. Here's where it gets real. Most people think being nice means being available. Being loving means being self-sacrificing. Being a good person means putting yourself last. But according to psychologists Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, that belief is the exact reason your life feels out of control. Because without boundaries, you don't have love, you have leakage, and you're bleeding energy every single day. The question that changes everything. Where do you end, and where does the rest of the world begin? That's the core question of the book, Boundaries. Imagine your life as a house. That house is you, your thoughts, your emotions, your time, your choices. Now imagine there's no fence. Anyone can walk in. Anyone can dump their problems in your living room. Anyone can rearrange the furniture of your life. And somehow, you feel responsible for cleaning it all up. Sound familiar? Here's the truth most people never hear. You are responsible to people, but you are not responsible for people. That single distinction changes everything. Why pleasing everyone is quietly destroying you. People pleasers don't lack kindness. They lack clarity. They confuse empathy with ownership. You feel someone's pain, so you try to fix it. You sense disappointment, so you override your limits. You fear conflict, so you abandon yourself first. But here's the cost. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach people something dangerous, that your needs don't matter. And worse, you teach yourself the same thing. Wait till you hear this. Resentment is not a personality issue. It's a boundary alarm. It's your internal warning system saying, someone crossed a line, and you didn't stop them. Boundaries are not walls, they're gates. Let's clear up a myth. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're not about becoming cold or selfish. They're not about conflict. Boundaries are gates. You decide what comes in. You decide what stays out. You decide how much access someone has to your time, energy, and emotions. And the most basic boundary tool of all? A two-letter word that terrifies most adults. No. Not an excuse, not a justification, not a long explanation. Just no. And here's the part no one warns you about. When you start using boundaries, people will react. Some will respect you more, some will test you, and some will get angry. But that reaction tells you everything you need to know. Because people who truly care about you don't need unlimited access to you. Responsibility, the trap that keeps you stuck. Let's talk about the most dangerous boundary mistake. Taking responsibility for other people's emotions. If you say no and someone gets upset, that discomfort is not yours to fix. That's their work. But people pleasers were trained early to believe, if someone is unhappy, it must be my fault. So they step in, they rescue, they soften consequences, and unintentionally, they keep others immature while burning themselves out. Here's the hard truth. You cannot grow for someone else. You cannot choose for someone else. You cannot feel for someone else. And trying to do so will slowly erase you. The turning point. This is where you become the hero. Every hero's journey begins with discomfort, and yours begins the moment you realize this. Your life is not meant to be managed by guilt. Boundaries are not rejection. They are self-respect in action. They are the line that allows you to love others without losing yourself. And in the next part, we're going to break down the laws of boundaries, The invisible rules that explain why your relationships feel exhausting, why saying no feels terrifying, and why change has felt impossible until now. But here's where it gets real. Once you understand these laws, you can never unsee them, and your life will demand a response. Let's talk about rules. Not the kind written on paper, the invisible ones that govern every relationship in your life. Because whether you realize it or not, boundaries obey laws. And when you break those laws, life doesn't punish you out of cruelty, it corrects you through pain. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most of the exhaustion you feel right now isn't because people ask too much. It's because you keep breaking these laws trying to be liked. Law number 1, sowing and reaping. This one hits hard. Every action has a consequence. That's how humans grow. But when you constantly rescue people from the results of their choices, you steal their chance to mature. Example: your friend overspends, can't pay rent, calls you in panic. Being responsible to them means listening, offering guidance, empathy. Being responsible for them means paying the rent. And that second option feels loving, but it actually teaches helplessness. Here's the painful truth. Growth requires consequences. When you block consequences, you block growth, and you exhaust yourself trying to hold someone else's life together. Law number 2, the law of responsibility. This one frees you if you let it. You are responsible for your feelings, your choices, your actions. You are not responsible for other people's emotions, their reactions, their happiness. If you say no and someone feels angry, disappointed, or sad, that emotion belongs to them. Let me say that again, slowly. Their reaction is their responsibility, not yours. Most people pleasers hear this and feel panic. But what if they're upset? Yes, they might be. And that doesn't make you wrong. Law number 3, the law of power. Here's a harsh reality check. You do not have the power to change other people. You can explain, you can beg, you can sacrifice, but you cannot control them. And the moment you accept that, your energy comes back to you. Because the only thing you truly control is your response, your behavior, your boundaries. Trying to fix others is seductive. It makes you feel needed, but it quietly keeps you stuck. Wait till you hear this. Letting go of control is not giving up. It's growing up. Law number 4, the law of respect. Want people to respect your boundaries? Start by respecting theirs. This is where people pleasers get confused. They say, I would never say no like that. I'd never do that to someone. So when someone says no to them, they feel hurt or rejected. But healthy people understand something critical. A no is not an attack. It's information. Respect goes both ways. If you ignore others' limits, you teach them it's okay to ignore yours. Law number 5, the law of motivation. Ask yourself this, honestly. Why do you say yes? Is it love or fear? Fear of being abandoned, fear of being judged, fear of conflict, fear of guilt. Because when fear is your motivation, your giving is not free. It's transactional. And real love doesn't come from obligation. Boundaries shift your motivation from fear to freedom. You help because you choose to, not because you're scared not to. Law number 6, hurt versus harm. This one changes everything. Setting boundaries may hurt people, but hurt is not harm. A child cries when you take away candy. That doesn't mean the boundary is wrong. Adults also cry, emotionally, when they lose access they never should have had. And here's the key distinction. Hurt equals temporary discomfort. Harm equals long-term damage. Boundaries cause hurt. Lack of boundaries causes harm, to them and to you. Law number 7, proactive versus reactive. Boundaries. Most people don't set boundaries. They explode. They bottle things up, smile, say yes, until one day, they snap. That's a reactive boundary. Healthy boundaries are calm, clear, consistent. They're expressed before resentment builds. And yes, they feel terrifying at first. But they save relationships instead of destroying them. The shift that changes your life. Here's what no one tells you. When you start respecting yourself, your relationships will change. Some will improve. Some will end. Some will resist. But every one of them will become honest. And in the next part, we'll talk about where boundaries matter most: family, friendships, work, and the hardest one of all, boundaries with yourself. This is where real change begins. This is where it gets personal. Because setting boundaries in theory is easy. Setting them with real people, people you love, depend on, or fear losing, that's the real test. So let's walk straight into the hardest rooms of your life. Boundaries with family, leaving home without leaving love. Family is where most boundary issues are born, because family trained you who to be before you had a choice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Becoming an adult means emotionally leaving home, not physically, emotionally. If your parents' approval still controls your decisions, if guilt shows up every time you choose differently, if you feel like a bad son or bad daughter for saying no, you haven't left yet. And that's not an insult, it's common. Here's the key shift. Honoring your parents is not the same as obeying them. Adults don't obey other adults. You can love your parents and still say, "This doesn't work for me." That boundary will feel like betrayal at first, but it's actually maturity. Wait till you hear this. Parents who resist your boundaries are often reacting to their own fear. Fear of losing control, relevance, or closeness. Your job is not to manage that fear. Your job is to live your life responsibly. Boundaries with friends, when support turns into parenting. Let's talk about that one friend. You know the one. Always in crisis, always needing help, always just one more thing. And you're always the rescuer. Here's the hard question. Is this friendship, or are you parenting an adult? Healthy friendships are mutual. Support flows both ways. If one person is always the giver and the other is always the taker, resentment is guaranteed. Setting a boundary here might look like not answering immediately, limiting emotional labor, saying, "I can't help with that." And yes, they might pull away. That's the test. People who value you will adjust. People who valued your availability will disappear. Both outcomes bring clarity. Boundaries at work. Why overworking is a boundary problem. Let's clear something up. Being overwhelmed at work is often not a workload issue. It's a boundary issue. If you say yes to everything, your yes means nothing. Here's what healthy professional boundaries sound like. I can take this on, but something else has to move. I can meet that deadline, but not this one. I'll need clarity on priorities before committing. That's not laziness, that's leadership. And here's the irony. People who set boundaries at work are often respected more, not less. Because clarity builds trust. Burnout builds mistakes. Now the hardest one. Boundaries with yourself. This is where it gets real. Because sometimes the person violating your boundaries is you. You say you want health, but don't stop scrolling at midnight. You say you want financial peace, but keep impulse spending. You say you want change, but avoid discomfort. Internal boundaries mean saying no to the version of you that wants comfort now over growth later. That requires honesty and responsibility. And yes, discipline. External boundaries won't hold if internal ones collapse. Why boundaries feel so scary? Let's name the fear. If I say no, they'll leave. If I set limits, I'll be alone. If I stop pleasing, I'll be unloved. Here's the truth that changes everything. Anyone who leaves because you set a boundary was benefiting from you not having one. They didn't love you. They loved access. Boundaries don't destroy relationships. They reveal them. And yes, some relationships won't survive that revelation. But the ones that do, they become deeper, safer, more real. Anger is not a sign you're wrong. When you start setting boundaries, people may get angry. Not because you're cruel, but because the rules changed. Think of it like this. You removed a vending machine that used to dispense unlimited access. Of course there's backlash. Your job is not to argue. Your job is to hold the line calmly. No defending, no over-explaining, no guilt speeches. Just consistency. Anger fades, clarity remains. What you gain on the other side. Here's what boundaries give you back. Energy, peace, self-respect, honest relationships, freedom to choose love, not obligation. And most importantly, you stop living life in reaction mode. You start living intentionally. In the final part, we'll bring everything together, and I'll show you how boundaries don't isolate you. They make real intimacy possible. This is where it all clicks. Type next for the final 700 words. Let's land this. Because boundaries aren't about becoming cold. They aren't about pushing people away. They aren't about becoming selfish. They're about becoming free. And freedom changes everything. What boundaries actually give you? When you finally stop over-giving, when you stop explaining yourself to exhaustion, when you stop carrying emotions that were never yours, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter, calmer, clearer. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you're no longer fighting battles that were never meant to be yours. Boundaries return ownership of your life. Your time becomes yours again. Your energy becomes intentional. Your love becomes voluntary. And that's the key word. Voluntary. Love that's forced isn't love. It's obligation. Boundaries turn obligation into choice. The hidden gift. Boundaries create intimacy. Here's the paradox most people miss. Boundaries don't create distance. They create safety. When people know where you stand, when your yes is real and your no is clear, there's no guessing, no resentment, no emotional landmines. That's intimacy. Real intimacy doesn't come from unlimited access. It comes from mutual respect. Think about the healthiest people you know. They're not available to everyone. They're available intentionally. That's why being around them feels grounding, not draining. Why guilt is a liar. Let's talk about guilt, because guilt is the biggest weapon against boundaries. Guilt says, you're selfish, you're hurting them, you're a bad person. But here's the truth. Pain is not always harm. Someone feeling disappointed because you said no is not the same as you hurting them. Discomfort is often the price of growth, for them and for you. You are not required to light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. Boundaries are a filter. This might be hard to hear, but boundaries act like a filter in your life. People who respect you will adapt. People who don't will resist, guilt trip, or disappear. That hurts, but it also clarifies. And clarity is better than confusion that lasts for years. Boundaries don't cost you the right people. They reveal the wrong ones. What happens when you hold the line? At first, it feels awkward. Your voice shakes when you say no. Your stomach tightens. Your mind races with what-ifs. That's normal. You're breaking a pattern. But over time, the shaking stops. The guilt softens. Your confidence grows. And people start treating you differently.
not because you demanded respect, but because you modeled it. The final shift: responsibility without rescue. Here's the mature way to love people. Be responsible to them, not responsible for them. Care, support, listen, but don't rescue. Let people experience the consequences of their choices. That's how growth happens. That's how dignity is preserved. And that includes you. Your new definition of love. Love is not saying yes out of fear. Love is not avoiding conflict. Love is not self-erasure. Love is honesty with compassion. Love is limits with kindness. Love is presence without resentment. And boundaries are how you practice that. The line that changes everything. Remember this: boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. Not you instead of me, not me instead of you. Both. That's balance. That's adulthood. That's freedom. Your call to action. Soft, but powerful. So here's your challenge. Not tomorrow, not someday. Today. Set one boundary. One honest no. One clear limit. One moment where you choose self-respect over approval. It will feel uncomfortable. Do it anyway. That discomfort is the sound of your life expanding. And if this hits something real inside you, if you're done living exhausted and resentful, don't just scroll. Subscribe. Because learning to protect your life is the first step to actually living it.